Welcome to the official Lawyer Minds podcast. Lawyer Minds is an ever-growing ecosystem for all the resources modern lawyers need. As the official Lawyer Minds podcast, we'll discuss everything from the latest happenings on the website to industry news. Get ready. Here we go. It's time to dive into the minds of successful lawyers. Here are your hosts, Tad Thomas and Mike Campbell.
Mike, you always know what the jury is thinking, right?
Every single time. I have like this mental ability to read every single juror's mind.
You know, every time I've tried a case, I've looked at the jury and I've looked at every member of the jury and I said, I know exactly what you're thinking. And I don't think I've ever been right.
You're right. I remember the first time I saw Devil's Advocate and then rewatching it after I went to law school and thinking, that guy's so full of crap. But then, you know, like his secret was it's an attorney and he can read his skill is reading people in jury selection. And his secret was he listened to them deliberate through a hole in the bathroom wall, which
that's the only way to do it. That's the only way to know.
That's the only way to know. That's the only way to know. I mean, but there is a way we can do that though, right? You know, to kind of figure out what maybe what a potential jury might be thinking.
You can try. There's things that we can tee up. I remember one of the first cases I ever tried was an attempted murder case, and there was no connection with my client who we were on trial, no connection with my client to the scene at all, other than one supposed eyewitness. And they spent 30 minutes with the evidence tech going through like a hat that was found and some clothing at the scene and things like that. And after 30 minutes of direct on cross, I had one question. I said, officer, thank you for coming in. Is there anything that connects my client to the scene in all of this evidence that you just admitted? And she, of course, said no. I sat down. I had one question. 30 minutes into the jury deliberations, what does the jury come back and ask? Can we see the clothes?
You read their mind that time, man.
Read their mind that time. So,
well, you can do focus groups though, right? You can sit down with folks and talk with them about the case. And sometimes it's best to have someone else do the focus groups.
Yep. Do you use focus groups a lot?
I need to do more, but yes, I do focus groups. And one of the things I like to do is have someone else do them because I sometimes can't see my own bias, I guess, or I maybe try to underplay or overplay my case.
Yeah, and I've done it both ways. I've done them myself. I've done them as concept focus groups when I've done them myself. And the way that I do it there is, I sit down, I tell the focus group jury that, I'm independent. I tell them I know both sides, just happen to know both sides, both attorneys in this case. They asked me to do this to see what you guys think. And I'll throw out just little bitty pieces of information and then just say, what do you want to know? And then get them talking and just have them ask questions. And then as the day goes on, I just feed them little bits of information. I try to be even handed as to, for every good fact, I give them a bad fact and really find out what they're interested in. And you do that a couple times and you find out what path they're leading you down. And I found that's effective, and you can do that by yourself. The other kinds of focus groups where you're doing, the clopening, given an open, a 15-minute opening and closing at the same time.
Right.
I always think that's better with somebody else.
Right. That's a very good distinction. And one of the things that I actually do too is I'll send a set of facts to my father-in-law, who was a mail carrier for 30 years, and he has very practical sense about him. And he'll beat my cases up pretty good and say, "Oh, this doesn't make sense," or "I'm seeing it that way." And so something as inexpensive as that is available, I think, to everyone.
So our purpose of this podcast is introduce another podcast that Lawyer Minds is going to be doing. That's going to be Saul Gruber, who's going to be doing a podcast called The Jury Thinks What?
Right.
That's what it's called, right?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah. Who's on first?
Yeah, exactly. And, Saul, we're going to talk to Saul for a few minutes, and he's been practicing for 25 years, done mostly nursing home litigation. We'll talk to him a little bit about that, tried a bunch of cases. And he's now down in Florida with Gruber Trial Consulting, and he's working with attorneys all over the country, not just on nursing home cases, but a little bit of everything. I've had him help me out on a couple things, talk to him all the time on brainstorming cases and themes and things like that. So I'm real excited to get Saul's podcast going.
And I mean, it fits right in with exactly what we're trying to do, because Saul brings his wealth of experience in trying cases and providing consulting services for people that have just started practicing to people who've been practicing for 30, 40 years. And having him, provide a resource, especially for those newer lawyers, to learn and grow from, I think is exactly what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, he's always been real good about, teaching CLEs and things like that, and, giving a wealth of information. And I know a lot of the attorneys that he works with, and, the attorneys that he works with are really talented lawyers. And I think he's going to be bringing some of them on his podcast as well.
Which is exciting, because that's how everyone can learn. And knowing that he's going to have people who started, we all have to start somewhere, right? It's about practicing. And I just read an interview that's going to be published next week. And the quote was, it's about practicing, not conquering, and learning that everybody's just still practicing. And hopefully some of those practice tips will flow through, and some of the lawyers more experience will learn something.
Yeah. And maybe after we do our interview, let's talk about some of the written interviews that we've had up, because we've had some real good ones. But
we've had some real good ones. We've got some great ones coming up too.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Yep.
So right now, our interview with Saul Gruber and his podcast, The Jury Thinks What? So let's introduce Saul Gruber and his new podcast, The Jury Thinks What? Saul, welcome to the Lawyer Minds podcast.
Thanks, Tad. Thanks, Mike.
And welcome to the Lawyer Minds ecosystem. We're really excited to have you on board to do your podcast. But before we talk about the podcast, I want to talk about you a little bit. You and I have known each other for many years now. Trial lawyer from New Jersey, relocated to Florida. And now with Gruber Trial Consulting. Tell me a little bit about when you were practicing law. What kind of work did you mainly do? Obviously, you tried a lot of cases.
Yeah, I tried a ton of cases up in New Jersey. Mainly what I did was nursing home abuse and neglect, where we would represent victims of poor care in nursing homes. But those type of cases I kind of talk about as complex litigation cases. So whether it's a nursing home case, whether it's a medical malpractice case, whether it's a complicated trucking type of case, one of the things I always did was handle those type of situations where we've got to get across to the jury that it's more about what they're seeing in front of them. And that's how at least I always handled the case when practicing and when handling the trials, and how important it is to look ahead and kind of look at the big picture. And about 2 years ago, after my 30th year of practicing law, I came down to Miami and shifted a lot of what I do into consulting, where I fly all over the country and with firms like your own and Mike's, kind of help look at cases a different way and make trial lawyers expand their horizons and think of things outside the box. So we're pretty excited, and that's why we're excited to really join this particular ecosystem. Is it's a chance where we can get together with other lawyers who are always thinking outside the box and how better to do something. Because as good as we lawyers think we are, there's always a better way to do something. But you have to take chances, you have to take risks. And that's kind of the fun that I have now dealing with lawyers all over the country.
When Mike and Ryan and I kind of came up with the idea and started developing the idea of Lawyer Minds, it's obviously intended for lawyers to share information with other lawyers, whether it's on practice tips or trial tips and things like that. So it's great for us to have somebody like you involved in Lawyer Minds, because you have such a wealth of knowledge on not only trying cases, but you ran your own firm for many, many years too, right?
Yeah, I had my own firm since about 2002. going on to just a few years ago. So all the fun stuff of having your own firm, whether it be cash flow, whether it be staffing, I have a pretty good knowledge of. Not sure it's correct, but I certainly have a lot of knowledge about it.
So tell us a little bit about, before we get into your podcast again, what is Gruber Trial Consulting? What does a trial consultant do? And what kind of services do you provide for lawyers?
So I think trial consulting is one of those phrases that means something different to every trial consultant and to everybody who hires one. The way we've been doing it, we've broken down our business into two separate sections. One is helping lawyers figure out what jurors want to hear and what will work, what will make them think a certain way. At least we hope so. So we're doing focus groups all over the country. Right now, we have a project where we're doing multiple online focus groups nationwide, trying to find out what the new normal is, given the COVID infection and our sequestration in our homes, how people think about everything. That's one thing that a consultant does. Another thing a consultant will do is help the lawyer look at their own evidence, how to change, not so much change it, how to sequence it. I guess the better phrase would be more acceptable by a jury. And I'll give you an example. In a focus groups, we've had a picture of a car that was in a horrific car accident, and it just looked mangled. And we showed one focus group that picture, and everybody in the jury said, well, that person must have been speeding. And the person in the car obviously did something wrong to let damage like that happen. We then, in a second focus group, put that picture in context that this person was just driving on the road and a car came out of nowhere and hit them. As soon as the focus group learned that, then the damage to the car meant to them horrific injury, as opposed to it was the fault of the person driving. And nothing changed in the evidence. It was just in the sequence that it was given. That's the type of thing we do with people all over the country. The other section of our corporation or our business is helping lawyers handle nursing home cases. We don't act as lawyers, we act as consultants, where we come in, we review documents for them, we tell lawyers what we think, what we see. We go through the checklist that I've used in practicing for 30 years of the type of documents that each lawyer may want to get. And you'd be surprised how many people are handling a nursing home case and have never really handled them before. So we kind of walk them through that and get them to the point where they need to be for their clients. And that's kind of what a consultant does. The other thing a consultant does is whatever the client wants, to be brutally honest with you. Some clients need more hand-holding, some clients need more babysitting, and that's kind of what we do.
So Saul, real quickly, I want to talk about something you had mentioned about the focus groups. And one of the things that I think that you're able to do, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're able to come in and really challenge some of the assumptions that lawyers make about the evidence, that the jury will just completely understand where the lawyer is trying to go with the case.
It is incredible to me, Mike, and probably you know this as well as being a trial lawyer, how many assumptions lawyers make, especially those who are trial lawyers. And I'm not talking about litigators. I'm not talking about people who look at documents. I'm talking about lawyers who stand up and talk to the jurors. We think we are the end all be all. For some reason, we think our opinion is the opinion everyone else will have. What we forget is that we're jaded not only by our education, but by our work experience. And more often than not, what we think a piece of evidence means is not what the jury thinks. In fact, it may be the opposite. So in many situations, if trial lawyers do not do focus groups, and when I say focus groups, I'm not talking about just where you bring 50 people in and have a formal focus group. It could be going to the restaurant down the street and talking to 4 people in the restaurant. Hey, what does this mean to you? Hey, what does that mean to you? And you would be shocked at what they come back and tell us. And I think if you're not doing the focus groups and you're trying a lot of cases, you're not putting your best effort for your client, because what we think is right doesn't make it right. We really have to know what the jury thinks and what the jury wants to hear. That's the only thing that matters. It doesn't matter what we want to say. We're irrelevant to the case.
Tell us what you're going to do with your podcast.
Well, one of the things I learned, and I think I was in a bubble along with you, Tad, and you, Mike, where we are associating ourselves with all the best trial lawyers in the country every couple months, whether it's going to a seminar, going to a convention, or just meeting for dinner. And we think that everybody has the same abilities that we have. And more importantly, everybody knows what we know and studies what we study. What I'm learning now that I'm kind of removed from that bubble somewhat is that's not the case. The old days where some of us were hired by big firms, were mentored for a number of years, learned how to try cases, people looked at our openings and our closings, doesn't happen anymore. We see lawyers are coming out of law school. They're opening their own law firms. They're worried about getting cases, and they just think, well, we'll try the case when we have to. And they're the people that I think need a podcast about what to do. Simple things like, how do you get something into evidence? The three of us laugh about that, yet there's a whole sect of lawyers who are terrified about that and have no idea what it means. There's a concept that we learned in law school called evidence. It was very complicated in law school. We weren't quite sure what it means. Now the three of us probably have the rules memorized and know exactly what has to happen. You've got a large sect of lawyers who don't. So my role I see as somebody is almost like a mentor about talking about the different things that happen leading up to trial at trial that give everybody the ability to have that mentor, the ability to find out how you do certain things. And that's why during the podcast, I'm hoping to be able to answer a lot of questions that people have. And that's really what I think lawyers need right now.
What kind of guests are you going to have?
Well, our goal is not to have the top of the top trial lawyers. My goal is to have
Mike and I aren't going to be on there.
No, well, unless you have to be. My goal is to have the regular lawyer, the person who tries their 3 to 4 cases a year, struggles sometimes, doesn't struggle sometimes, has good verdicts, has bad verdicts, and is going to come on and just talk about them, talk about their cases, dissect not just the $20 million case, but the $80,000 verdict, what their demand was, what they think they did right, what they think they did wrong. And I think that will resonate a lot more to the person who is handling the cases.
And that it's totally judgment free. I mean, we're talking about if you don't know how to put something into evidence, that's fine. You're going to walk them through that. They just have to ask, and they just have to be willing to be vulnerable to ask.
It's completely judgment free. I can tell you this. Anybody who tells you they've never been in court and made a mistake is a liar. Anybody who tells you that they can't wait to open and don't have feelings of nausea and pangs of fright are not telling the truth. Everybody, from the top of the top to people like us, me, you, me, Tad, and Mike. We all have different issues. We all have different problems that happen in every trial. And the only way we know to change that is when it happens.
That's right. That's great. I mean, I think that a lot of people will benefit from this podcast, and particularly the group that you're talking about. And there's something too about experienced lawyers listening to maybe newer lawyers who are going through some of the same issues. Maybe just some of the experienced lawyers don't want to talk about, right?
It's an interesting situation. I remember years ago, I used to be chair of AAJ, of the Nursing Home Litigation Group. The AAJ is the National Trial Lawyers, the biggest group for plaintiff lawyers. And we put a section of it together of learn from your mistakes. And we knew of a couple trials that just didn't come out the way the lawyers wanted it. And we asked them to speak. And I was taken aback at how many people who I know very well were reticent to speak. They didn't want people to know, oh, well, this trial didn't come in the way I wanted it. And I said to them, well, do you think that we all believe that everything you do is perfect? Because I don't want to be on that pedestal. I don't want to hold myself up to that standard. That's an impossible standard. I mean, we've all been cross-examining a witness thinking the deposition transcript said one thing and it said the other. And we've got, at that point, the jury looking at us, the judge looking at us, the witness is sweating, and we're grilling them. You remember this, you swore to tell the truth. This was closer to the time this happened. You were sitting, your lawyer was next to you, and do you remember saying, and you look down and it doesn't say what you think it said. And you say, I have nothing further, and you sit back down as if nothing happened. And meanwhile, you're dying inside. Uh-huh. That happens to everybody. It's going to happen. How you react to the things are what we talk about, because that's really what makes the trial lawyer. Bad things are going to happen. How you react to them can make the difference between the jury even realizing it was bad and not.
I forget which one of our friends, but I learned this in one of the nursing home seminars. But he was talking about how he was in trial and the defense expert was on in the afternoon and had some, report or had relied on some article and started spouting all this stuff off. And so he gets the article, and overnight he like reads it, and he's like, walks in the next day. He's like, I totally know this article inside and out. I'm going to cross-examine this guy so hard on this article, ask him like 3 questions, and the expert just eviscerates him. He's like, you obviously don't understand what you're reading, blah, 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 blah. And then the expert goes on for like 10 minutes, and the lawyer realized how he had been burned, and his reaction to it was, doctor, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Turned around and sat down. And then when they interviewed the jury after, the jury was like, yeah, we thought you killed him. And it just because of the reaction. They had no idea what that article meant. You know,
I mean, how many times do we make an objection or are we objected to, and the judge sustains the objection, and you look right at the judge and you say, thank you, Your Honor, appreciate that. Right?
Yep.
And you sit back down, and the jury's thinking, if they like you, right, they're going to think, oh, he's nice and he won that objection.
If you've got that credibility.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And trying cases is all about credibility.
That's right.
Is.
That's right.
Well, Saul, thanks so much for being on. I'm really looking forward to you being having your podcast on the Lawyer Minds website and sharing all the information that you have and bringing guests on to talk about other information. What you've talked about your podcast is going to be is quintessentially exactly what we want Lawyer Minds to be about. So really looking forward to it and looking forward to your first podcast.
It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it, guys. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Thanks for joining the family, Saul.
Thanks.
Mike, what'd you think?
I'm excited. I'm excited to hear more from Saul and then more from his guest. He's just an exciting guy. He's one of those guys at the AJ conferences that he just has this like huddle of people around him talking to him.
He's high energy. He knows how to track cases, and he's done it a lot. He's taken licks, and he's the kind of guy we want to have on our podcast, on Lawyer Mind's website, because he didn't care about telling you about the ones he lost and the mistakes that he made. He's happy to tell you about that so that you can learn from him that way as well.
And there's just so much pressure when you see these big judgments or verdicts, and you just don't understand that there's so many losses that lead up to those big judgments and verdicts. And I'm excited to hear from Saul about some of those bad experiences he has, as well as some of the good ones.
Yeah, he's certainly won a lot. Lots of depositions, lots of focus groups. His consulting business has really taken off. So I'm really anxious to hear, because I think doing the consulting business, you see so many different things. And that kind of leads me into some of the interviews that we've already done. One of the interviews we did was with the written interviews that are online with Ken Levinson. And, Ken is a jury consultant, trial consultant as well, and does a bunch of focus groups with really high-end, talented lawyers. And I remember Ken talked about on his interview, what to look for, what he sees, what's the common thread in these high-end lawyers that he's been working with. And I'm sure Saul's going to give us some of the same.
And that's the same theme I got out of Laird's interview as well. Steve Laird's interview that's on the site is his experience in dealing with high-profile lawyers with big verdicts and lots of success, and how, it goes back to that, they're just trying cases. And, everybody wakes up in the morning and puts on their pants and their shoes the same way, right? It's just that they've continued to push forward and be resilient. And all these themes come out in these interviews, and I'm just excited about the ones that we have up, and then I'm excited about the ones we have coming up, especially next week, and then also some of the podcasts we have.
Yeah, we got, I think, some good podcasts coming up. We've got a lot of stuff planned. I know one that we've already got scheduled to do an interview with Mark Kozorodsky, who's written 2 books already, and I talked to him today. He's actually writing a third. So I'm looking forward to having him on to talk about all kinds of things. We could talk to Mark for 3 hours, and anybody that knows Mark knows that's true.
And you got to watch him live, right? I mean, you can't listen to it because you got to see his hair
He's won every time. Anybody that goes to an AAJ convention that's new, they say, who should I go see speak? And Kaz is the one that you got to go see him.
Yeah, he's so high energy,
entertaining, but such, a wealth of knowledge and great information. And then another one that we've got scheduled is with Toby Milrod, trial lawyer up in Philadelphia. That's going to be the incoming AAJ president this year. So we're going to talk to him about Amped Up, which is, what we talked to Colleen about a couple of weeks ago. But then really want to talk to him about his year coming up as president of AAJ and what he's got planned.
Right. And Toby's got an amazing story that has kind of made the rounds online. And it's about this coming issue about nursing home and other types of business immunities during the time of COVID. And hopefully Toby will be willing to share some of that information. But if not, I just want to hear about, hey, what's it like to be the incoming president for the largest trial lawyers association in the country? And, how does that affect someone's practice? And what does it mean to be involved with an organization like AAJ?
Well, thanks everybody for listening or watching, as the case may be. Hope you'll come back for the next one that we have coming up here in a couple of weeks. And also tune in for The Jury Thinks What with Saul Gruber. Have a good one.
See you, Dad.
See you, man.
That wraps another episode of the official Lawyer Minds podcast. Please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Explore the other content Lawyer Minds has to offer and engage with us on social media. Your feedback on the show and ideas for future shows is always welcomed. See you next time.